Music of the Soul Prelude, Chapter 12. Neil carefully closed the wood-bound book on the desk before him. The wood itself was weathered and the pages close to crumbling. Much of the text had been unreadable due to age and wear, but he had thought such an ancient text would have the information he needed. Such was not the case, unfortunately. With a sigh, he stood and carefully replaced it on the shelf where it had been previously, careful not to brush it too harshly against the shelf or the other Wisen books that were on it. Yuto Hideyoshi would have his head on a silver platter if he damaged any of the ancient texts. Normally, one would expect a library full of ancient texts to be dusty and dark, but Yuto was immaculate, both in his private life and at work. There was nary a speck of dust to be seen, and while the one window in the room was large and provided a lot of sunlight that Yuto made sure would not reach the ancient texts for fear that it would further damage them, there were also several overhead incandescent lights. One never strained their eyes in the library, at least not due to dim light. Currently, his eyes felt dry and grainy and strained, but that was because he'd just spent most of the morning studying ancient crumbled books with text that was faded at best. Neil ran his finger along the spines of several other books, wood or leather bound, on the same shelf, looking for another book that might be useful. Delicate though they were, the older books were more likely to hold the lore that he was looking for. Because of their delicacy, though, he was the only one allowed to pull one ancient text from the shelves at a time. He suspected that was mostly due to the fact that the desk near the door was too small to safely stack old and crumbling books. Newer books could handle it, and usually did so long as they did not fall to the floor. Yuto was positively protective over the books in the library, and dropping a book, no matter what condition it was in, would earn you a visit to one of the two disciplinarians they had, depending on whether you were a student or a follower. But the older books were just too fragile to risk stacking. "Here we go," he murmured to himself, as his finger came across an ancient-looking text as thick as his leg, bound in wood and leather that was cracking from age. Several pages were askew, as though they had fallen out and been placed back in order without rebinding or taping it in place. He took it gingerly in his hands and returned to the small desk by the door in the library, nodding to Yuto silently as he passed the man at the desk. Fortunately, he was too busy examining an old text to notice Neil, or he would have been on the receiving end of a cold glare no matter how much he practiced proprieties. He was particularly protective of the older books, and didn't like anyone touching them, not even those who had been followers for generations. Neil gingerly laid the book on the small desk and gently opened it, being careful to support both covers to prevent damaging the binding any further, and turned the pages one by one. The paper was close to crumbling at his touch, and the script was badly faded and hard to read. It began to look like this book would be another bust, until he came upon a passage that looked like it had been copied over to keep the print clear. That was what had caught his attention in the first place. The bold, clear script on paper that was near to crumbling, where other pages were faded almost to emptiness. The text he had chosen was an ancient history text, and this particular chapter spoke of an ancient battle between the special souls of old and a deity by the name of Rohe. The language was difficult to read and required him to guess what it was so he could look up a translation book, but the picture at the top of the page depicted a group of people fighting against a woman with long raven hair, ebony eyes, black painted lips, and porcelain skin in a flowing midnight gown. She fit Krista's description perfectly, or nearly so. The clothes were different, but who was to say that this goddess, or whoever she was, couldn't appear to be more modern? Thinking quickly, Neil pulled a pencil and a sheet of paper from one drawer of the desk, which was kept stocked in case someone needed to take notes from some of the books in this room, and started copying what he had read and translated from the page. "Rohe," he muttered to himself as he wrote. Moriori, deity of death and the underworld. You were locked away a long time ago, though, weren't you? Bet you weren't too happy about that. So why are you trying to touch the world now? Why wait so long? What are you muttering to yourself over there? Yuto snapped at him. He had to be the strictest bookkeeper Neil had ever seen. Nothing, he muttered absently. Well, keep it down over there. You know better, Neil. Yeah, I know, he grumbled, more to himself than anything else as he continued copying the page. But he knew that Yuto would hear him, however quiet he was. When he was done, Neil gingerly replaced the book on the shelf and left the library. He needed to speak to Laufey. That in itself would be a task, as he was not in good favor anywhere in their society right now, and probably would not be for a very long time. This, however, was too important. Much more important than any petty argument someone might have with him over the wisdom of bringing in an outsider. He knew Laufey wasn't one to hold grudges, but none could come to visit her without going through her secretary, Samuel Crow, and Samuel was barely on speaking terms with him at the moment. Getting past Samuel was going to be difficult at best, particularly since he had no intention of sharing anything he'd found with the man. Is Laufey in? He asked as he approached the well-tanned man with dark hair to his shoulders, marred by a streak of gray that started behind each ear, his sharp dark eyes furrowing in displeasure as soon as he saw Neil. Samuel's office was the only way into Laufey's office, and it had only been just down the hall from the library, on the other side of the hall, of course. The room, like all the others around here, was painted white, with a dark hardwood floor, a simple but sturdy desk on the east wall, with a single lamp on it covered in papers that Samuel was poring over, a cup full of pens and pencils, and a single long hawk feather. Because he was secretary to the eldest, he was allowed some decoration, but it extended only to the feather in his cup, collected years ago, and a hide stretched on a frame painted with a hawk in flight, and lightly adorned with feathers on the frame itself. She is not, he said firmly, before turning back to his paperwork before him on his simple desk, as though Neil's presence and request were of no consequence to him. He even raised one wrinkled, impatient hand to shoo him away. Try again later. As though to give him the lie, Laufey stepped out of her office door on the other side of the room. Samuel, do you have the... Oh, Neil, there you are. I was hoping you would show up today, she said when she caught sight of him. Samuel glared at him, clearly blaming Neil for being caught in a lie. They are right here, he said as he lifted a short stack of papers in the air with his hand, which Laufey strode across the room and took. In spite of some of their differences, Laufey and Samuel worked surprisingly well together. Laufey had not needed to finish her sentence for Samuel to know what she was looking for. Such was the way with those two. It was as though they could read each other's minds, though that, of course, was impossible, even for special souls. Thank you, Sam, she said as she took the papers and strode back to her office door, waving Neil in with her. Come in, Neil, come in. We must speak. You got that right, he muttered to himself as he followed her into her office, where he closed the door behind him. Laufey, being the eldest, was allowed to decorate her rooms and her office any way she liked with as much decorations as she liked. In centuries past, some had bedecked their offices in all manner of expensive decorations, portraits, decorations in gold and silver and expensive jewels, furniture made of expensive woods, cushions with patterns on them, colorful tapestries, and the like. And some had added little more than a vase of flowers. Laufey was one of the latter. Her desk was a sturdy, well-made desk of oak, recently polished more to keep the wood in good condition than for looks. Her chair was high-backed, but simply made, with no carving or decoration, and no cushion. The large window behind her desk had curtains only for the sake of privacy when she needed it, or to keep out the cold air in winter, and was plain white and heavy. Rather than a lamp on her desk, there was an incandescent light in the ceiling, plain and long and bright enough to read under easily. On the north wall was a single small vase with dried lavender in it for decoration. The south wall had a filing cabinet, which Laufey had disdained as ornamentation, but had finally seen the necessity of it when her office started to become cluttered with paperwork. That had been long before he was born, but it was a tale well known among everyone in their society. "You were hoping to see me?" he asked after a moment, as Laufey flipped through her stack of papers from Samuel. "Yes, I haven't heard from you since you brought Krista here, and I need an update on her. How goes her training?" That she remembered to call Krista by her name was no surprise. Laufey had incredible memory, and having someone there more powerful than she had been a concern to her, so she made a point of trying to keep tabs on her. "She struggles in my class due to her weight, but she's improving. She learns quickly and makes a mistake only once," he told her. "But," Laufey said, raising an eyebrow, "I hear a but in there. I worry about her mental health. From what I've observed of her, she struggles with anxiety and I suspect depression. She's also being bullied by students and teachers alike," he told her. "That is not unusual. It happens to all outsiders that come here. The first 2 or 3 weeks are brutal, but once they get past that point, things calm down," she told him, not sounding concerned. "It approaches abuse. Just yesterday, Malik apparently sent her to Camille for being unkempt when there was nothing wrong with her appearance. She was immaculate, and Camille has not been giving the standard penances or lectures like she would with other students. She's been beating Krista on a daily basis. I saw the bruises, layers of them." He had hoped to keep that as leverage against Camille, but it was better to report it to Laufey and have it stop now than to possibly let it continue and let her find some leverage over him. Not that she would find anything. He had made sure to abide by and uphold every rule and law so that no one could have leverage over him. But she would try. Laufey's eyebrows drew down in concern and anger. It was an expression rarely seen on the eldest, but Laufey in particular hated to have students abused. Outsider or not, bullied or no, there was no excuse for abuse. "Camille is abusing a student," she said dangerously. "Are you certain? That is a serious accusation to make." "I am certain. Ileana is a witness and has actually seen more of the bullying in person than I have. There's more, too, more important than this." "What could be more important than a student being abused by a disciplinarian?" Laufey said incredulously. "She's having nightmares," he told her. "Or a nightmare, anyway. It happened last night. I was going to the kitchen to get some tea late at night because I couldn't sleep when I heard her screaming and then heard her and Ileana talking. When I asked them what was going on, Ileana told me she'd had a nightmare." "Nightmares happen, Neil," Laufey said impatiently. "They will happen when one is being abused. How is this worse than the abuse itself?" "You mean aside from her already pre-existing mental illnesses?" he asked. One normally did not speak so to the eldest, but the effect of nightmares on top of already existing mental illness should have been obvious. As it was, she glared at him, causing him to shift his feet uncomfortably. Still, he did not back down. "She said a woman approached her in her dream, offering her power. When she refused, the woman offered her death and began burning her. She awoke with a blister on her back that had not been there before she went to bed. It was shaped like a diamond ring." For some reason, Laufey's mismatched eyes went wide at that. It was the closest he'd ever seen of her to being afraid. "A diamond ring? You are certain?" "You keep asking that," he huffed impatiently. "Yes, I am certain. I can draw it out for you if you want me to. Anyway, I did some research this morning on ancient cultures and deities, and I think I found something." "Rohe," she said before he could continue, and this time she did not sound afraid as she clasped her wrinkled hands in front of her, hiding them in her snowy robes. "You know about Rohe?" he gaped in surprise. "Yes. It is a secret passed from one eldest to the next, for the eldest's ears only," she said as she stood and slowly began to pace back and forth in front of her desk. "If it's a secret, why mention it to me?" "Because you've already found out. I knew I should have had that book burned, or at least that passage. You got it from Deities of the Ancient World, did you not?" "I thought so. That's the only book that remotely mentions Rohe." I've wanted to erase that passage, the whole book, for a long time now, but you know how Yuto is about his books. Someone had copied over the text in new ink so it could be read more easily. I had to find a translation book and really only managed to translate a little bit of it, he told her. They did what? Laufey demanded as she spun on him. They renewed the print. It was the only passage to be restored to some semblance of legibility. But Yuto wouldn't do that, would he? I know he likes to restore books, but even he knows to let that passage fade, doesn't he? I will have to ask him. He may not like to destroy or damage books, she explained, but he isn't against letting nature take its course on books with dangerous knowledge in them. How much did you translate? What was her dream exactly? Just that Rohei was locked up a long time ago, he told her. Why would she choose now to try and break free? I don't know. I might as well tell you the story. Sit, we have much to discuss. Neil found a stool sitting in the center corner of the room. It had no back or cushion and was not comfortable, but he'd been ordered to sit, so he sat on it and watched as Laufey paced the room anxiously. Long ago, she began, still pacing, but had slowed her pace as she thought furiously. Long before the nations we know them to be today had formed, long before the time of Christ, special souls were born on earth. This much is taught, of course, that they came and we don't know where from or why. What the stories leave out, though, was that they came with a myriad of deities, all with different names in different languages and cultures. Most were satisfied with staying hidden from human beings, even from special souls, though legend of them managed to creep around, hence the so-called pagan religions of this day. Most were satisfied with being worshipped in private, without ever being seen or really known. Rohei was the exception. She held great power and a great greed for more. She did not ask that humanity bow to her. She demanded it, or they would taste her power to their destruction. She did not hide herself, but went everywhere she could, demanding that all bow to her wherever she went. Many did so out of fear. Some did so out of love or ambition, and those became her closest followers. She would call none consort, but she had rankings amongst her servants. Those ranking highest were the ones allowed to look her in the face and talk to her directly. Some were given a portion of her power, to hold the law of absolute obedience that she demanded. It was seen as a great reward to be ranked high enough to deserve her personal attention. She ruled in fear and tyranny for centuries, killing any who opposed her and raising them back from death as her greatest servants. While a few of the special souls had chosen to follow her, many went into hiding, eventually coming together to form their own underground society, where they vowed to one day seal her away and bring peace to the world. Then one day the moon shadowed the sun, and a great power surged within the special souls. Some used that power to still the moon and sun in their alignment, to continue giving power to them, while others rose up together, and together they sang their soul song. Individual though their songs were, they worked together as one, sealing her away and killing her most trusted servants. So many special souls died that day that we nearly became extinct. Those who survived that day came together, reforming the shambles of their society. Eventually, they grew as people who were freed from the tyranny of Rohei came to them for a peaceful life, away from those who still wished to follow her or rule in her stead. As we grew, we spread out, for no one place could hold so many, neither could one place hold us safely away from the eyes of outside society, who viewed us with hatred for stealing away their queen. Now we have branches all over the world. Our own branch came over with Eric the Red, grew with the natives of this land, and spread with the arrival of the Mayflower. However, before we began branching off, one special soul had a vision that one day Rohei would return, that she would regain her lost power and once again rule the world in tyranny and death. Our only hope would be a special soul who would come to us from outside, But that soul, if not guided correctly, could just as easily destroy us. It was decided then that only the eldest would know this tale, or it would create a panic. As we began to branch off, each branch chose its eldest, and the original eldest told them the tale and the vision with a strict vow to tell no one but the next eldest, and only when their own death was imminent. Laufey's voice had grown hoarse with so much talking, but Neil had questions. How did it end up in a book if no one was to be told? He asked. My guess is that the legend was passed down from people outside our society who had survived. Whether or not they followed her or feared her, someone told later generations, who told their later generations, until eventually it was written down. Of course, as with any game of telephone, the tale was twisted in the retelling. So what was written is not actually what happened. Since the book was written during the Crusades, all of the copies were burned as heresy. One copy, of course, was preserved by the bookkeeper of the time, who made subsequent copies to be passed around to all the branches of the time. The book we have, of course, is a copy. Most of the other branches burned their copies, or that particular passage in them. Our particular branch has always been rather assiduous in preserving old texts, no matter what knowledge they held, which is why we still have our copy. The original was lost when the branch that had it was rooted out by the Knights Templar and destroyed for what they considered witchcraft. What about the other gods and goddesses? Why didn't they help us? Why don't they help us now? Neil asked. No one knows for certain. Our best guess is that, just as they came here a very long time ago, they likely moved on to other worlds a very long time ago, probably during Rohe's reign. Or perhaps that Rohe herself killed them out of jealousy. It is said anyone found worshipping anyone or anything else than her was killed for heresy. Boy, doesn't that sound familiar, he said flatly. Indeed, it does. Yet people still worship the old gods and goddesses as if they still existed, and we let them. We celebrate all so-called pagan religions because they are all one and the same, just under different names, and we don't tell them otherwise because they need something to hold on to, some form of hope. Otherwise, all would despair, Laufey told him, though he had not asked. She likely knew that he would. It made sense to ask these questions. Besides, though we cannot give them the whole truth, we want the memories of those old gods and goddesses to live on. What do you believe? He asked her, wondering much the same for himself now that he knew the truth. About what happened to the other gods and goddesses, I mean. I'm not sure, Laufey responded gravely. As horrible as it sounds, I hope that they were killed by Rohe. It is better than believing that they abandoned us. How do we fight this thing? He muttered, more to himself than anything, but loud enough for Laufey to hear him. You are too young to remember this. It was before your time, she began. But as a child, everyone was so awed at how powerful I was at such a young age that they fawned over me, using me as an example to all the other students of the time of good behavior and a goal to reach for themselves. The eldest of the time believed I was the one foretold to fight the return of Rohe, and fawned over me as much as everyone else, if not more. I always did hate that. It is almost a relief to have Krista here to direct their attention away from me. I truly believe she may be the one to fight Rohe. The vision never said the one would come from inside our society, after all. But that thought is almost as frightening as the return of Rohe. Is that why you asked me to keep you abreast of her progress? Neil asked. It is. If she breaks now, it will be dangerous to us, but less so if she broke later in her training when she has reached her full potential. There's more. I can hear it in your voice, he said. It was not a question. That blister you saw on her back, you said it was a diamond ring? Yes. Have you ever seen the solar eclipse? When the moon fully eclipses the sun, it leaves behind only a ring of light around it, shaped like a diamond ring. What does that have to do with Rohe and Krista? He asked. Only this. It was the solar eclipse that sealed Rohe away so long ago, she said gravely. I've been keeping abreast of current events outside our society. Upsetting, I know. And scientists at NASA say that there will be a solar eclipse in several months' time. There must have been others before this. Why didn't she escape then? She didn't have the strength. The seal put her into a deep sleep, but she is awake now and gathering her power to break free. She is weak yet, not yet able to fully touch the world, but I suspect she will use the same power that sealed her to break the seal. Once she does, I doubt even Krista will be enough to stop her. Wouldn't it make more sense then to focus more on training her and less on trying to break her? Better to have her break before she is trained than after, Laufey repeated. After, she could use that power to lash back and destroy us all. At least right now I could still stop her if I need to. And leave us all defenseless against Rohei, Neil shot back. Yes, better that than she does Rohei's work for her, Laufey said sternly. There was a limit to how much disrespect she would allow, even from him, even knowing what was going on through his head at the moment, what he must be feeling. I don't like it, he said simply, though he did soften his tone. You don't have to, she told him just as simply. You just have to abide by it and hope for the best. In that case, I request that you relinquish me of further punishment for my crimes in lieu of doubling her training. Everyone else has her hazing well in hand, he said, imbuing the word with as much scorn as he could safely muster around the eldest. If I'm lucky, I can train her to cope with the bullying better so she doesn't break it all. Granted, Laufey said coolly, but know this. The only reason I do this for you now, and allow you the disrespectful tone you've shown me just now, is because I know the burden of knowledge you now hold. Do it again, and I will have you birched. That sent a chill down Neil's spine. He knew the penalty for disrespect, and while he had not actually tried to be disrespectful, he realized he had come across as being so with his tone. By all reasoning, he deserved a birching now for breaking that law, and part of him silently thanked Laufey for her mercy. But his heart was still heavy knowing what he now knew, and he wanted to lash out. His head felt full and busy with all of this, and he knew he needed to meditate for a time to calm himself and sort out his feelings towards what he had just learned. Yes, eldest, he said meekly, bowing deeply. Thank you for your mercy. Good, he said with a tone that much in tone that she was done and done that done was done and well enough mended. I have much to think on, as do you, so you may go. Tell no one of what I told you. Too many would seek to destroy her as it is. Not even the council must know of this. Yes, eldest, he repeated respectfully with one final bow before leaving her office to go meditate on his own for a bit. He had a lot to think on, and he wasn't sure where to start.